The reason I'm having these discussions and throwing out like the Magnificent Seven in terms of effective observation practice, and sure, in a minute you'll see the 6 key components of great teaching. The reason I'm giving them to you is that they're important. It's important theoretical points for you to carry around in your head or on a checklist when you go out in observation, because it helps you kind of frame your evaluation of what you see happening in the classroom. And that's why I called it the Magnificent Seven and the 6 key components, because they're things you can hang on to when you're there in the classroom. So the 6 key components of great teaching are these. I remember this is from 200 pieces of research. What I'm handing out at the moment is a précis on what we spoke about in terms of what makes for effective observation practice, and also an explanation of these 6 points. Because these words are mine, really. I mean, they reflect what the report said, but teachers know their stuff. That's exactly what Tracy said, and Clive was talking about. The people who keep up to date, they really know their subject well. What the report actually says about it is that they call it pedagogical content knowledge. So the most effective teachers have deep knowledge of the subjects they teach, and where teachers' knowledge falls below a certain level, it's a significant impediment to students' learning. So if you don't know your stuff, how can you pass that on? How can you help other people learn? So as well as having a strong understanding, this is all on page 6 by the way, as well as a strong understanding of the material being taught, teachers must also understand the way students think about the content, be able to evaluate. Teachers also need to be able to evaluate the thinking behind students' own methods and identify students' common misconceptions. In all subjects, there's going to be common things that people grapple with to understand. People will make common mistakes, so teachers need to be aware of that as a starting point for what their learners might do. Mutations in Welsh, for example. The majority of people who stop learning Welsh stop at the stage of mutations are introduced. And I heard Mary Hughes, the Welsh Language Commissioner, say a year or so ago, I'm not bothered about people get their mutations right or not, I just want them to be able to talk to me in Welsh. Easy, isn't it? It's so it's something that the teacher needs to be aware of. If you're teaching Welsh, when you get to mutations, you've got to help people feel confident about talking, and that the mutations will come as they progress, rather than labouring the point, perhaps, and people feeling that they're not doing as well as they can do. It stops them learning Welsh. The quality of instruction. Teachers walk the talk. We were talking about, you spoke about assessment earlier. So assessment and instruction includes elements such as effective questioning. So you ask learners questions, the teacher will ask learners questions, not to put them on the spot or make them look daft, but in order so that they can understand whether the learner has got it really, whether they understand the subject. So practices like reviewing previous learning. If you go to a session, does the teacher start the lesson off by linking back to what learners have previously covered, to recap, to refresh their memory? And it isn't just about helping them remember what they've learned, but it's also about getting them into the zone for that particular lesson. Giving adequate time for practice to embed skills securely and progressively, and then progressively introducing new learning. We were talking about languages in this corner over here. The use of drilling in languages is important. Getting learners to practice saying things, practice pronunciation, practice language patterns is important. So if you go to a language class and people are saying Roin Hoffi coffee 6 or 7 times, well, it's an important skill for people to learn, that they get the pronunciation right, they understand how the pattern works, Roin Hoffi coffee, Roin Hoffi peldroid, Roin Hoffi rugby, so that they get, you know, I like coffee, I like football, I like rugby. It's important. That's the kind of giving people space to practice. If you're in art classes, if you're in a sketching class, is the tutor encouraging people to do little sketches throughout the week before the next session, and looking at those sketches and giving feedback on it. It's all that kind of stuff that's important. The third point, teachers are great at building relationships and setting expectations. What the report calls that is classroom climate. And that covers the quality of interactions between teachers and students. You all said it earlier. It's about teachers' expectations, having high expectations of learners and challenging them. If tutors don't have high expectations of learners won't have them themselves. You know, and quite often, if we go back to those statistics that we started the session off with, if learners haven't got high expectations of what they can achieve based on their previous experience, that tutor's got to have it for them. Because the tutor's got to build, inspire. We were all talking about inspiration there, weren't we, earlier? You've got to be able to inspire learners to move on to recognise that all learners have got potential and that they can all achieve. Classroom management. Teachers are great learning facilitators. The teacher needs to be able to make efficient use of lesson time, coordinate resources and space, manage students' behaviours with clear rules that are constantly enforced. So, you know, if somebody's forever turning up late to a class and is disruptive to the class, the teacher needs to deal with that sensitively and in a way that's helpful to both the individual learner and to the class, for example. If some groups of learners are constantly talking throughout the class, it can be off-putting. If mobile phones are being used throughout the class, how helpful, you know, text between learners, how helpful is that to the learning? Teachers got to do all that. But importantly, that bit about making efficient use of lesson time is, for me, a key issue. I was never so bothered about whether the tutor had their scheme of work and the lesson plan in the file on the night that we called there. Everybody uses standard lesson plans nowadays, standard schemes of work. The important point for me was, how well did the tutor use their scheme of work and their lesson plan to manage learning, to manage the pace of the lesson, to keep students engaged, to actually identify the individual learners' needs and address them within their planning. Those are the important points about that whole scheme of work planning and lesson planning. The teacher uses them to make efficient use of their lesson time and the time that those learners are with them, rather than the fact that they complete them as an administrative exercise, really. And again, that's the kind of discussion you can have with tutors as part of an observation process. Teachers' beliefs. They know what they're doing and why they're there, why they use particular practices, the purposes they aim to achieve within the lesson, i.e. what's the learning goal for that lesson, what their theories about learning are and how it happens, their conceptual models of the nature and role of teaching in the learning process. They were all important for for great teaching. So again, do teachers have an understanding about different learning styles and how to address them? Do they have an understanding of how learners think, and adult learners think in particular? There's a whole theory about adult learning, andragogy it's called. And if you type andragogy into Google, you'll get loads of good stuff coming up about how adults learn, what's the best way for them to do it. I say then you'll have stuff around learning styles, you might get stuff about a learning cycle, about how people are introduced to an idea, they begin to assimilate it, put it into practice, and then evaluate it. That kind of learning cycle. A guy called Kolb was the first person that introduced. The teachers need to have all these kind of tools in their bag. Is this the sort of stuff you teach on the course? So once they've got their certificate and they're out there in the field, we need to be helping them use those tools, don't we?
And move them on to the next stage.
Yeah, great. And then professional behaviour. Great teachers are reflective practitioners. Tracy said it. They need to be able to evaluate their work. And perhaps as an observer, you may see that they're not writing that bit, filling that bit in on their lesson plan, but you can talk to them about it, can't you? See if it's something that they actually do. Most of the tutors that I met through inspection, they had a really good understanding of their learners' needs. They knew what those learners needed to do to move on, what they wanted to learn. They weren't always great at writing that down. So, it's about, observation gives you a really good chance as an organisation to capture how tutors reflect on what they do and evaluate it, and then think about helping learners move on to the next stage.